Hi everyone. I'm Arnaud Rosier. I'm a physician. I'm a what you say a cardiac electrophysiologist here in France since 10 years, and I've been working on knowledge engineering. So as you'll see, I will not speak almost not at all about ML, machine learning or deep learning, which may change the mindset of some of you. But I think there's value in the things I'm going to explain. I hope so. So Implicity is a company that basically is trying to take advantage of the digitalization of medtech's area, which means that we are getting data from medical devices such as pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. We are integrated this data, but we are also a medical device company in the sense that we developed AI algorithms to provide more value to patient follow-up in this space. And just to begin with a small story. So this is what a cardiac electrophysiologist can see when you're checking a pacemaker of a patient. This is an Abbott patient. And this guy came to my office for a check of his pacemaker. I think it was 2013 now. And what I've seen is this, but before seeing this, I saw that this guy was in a wheeling chair because he had a stroke 2 weeks before. And what I've checked is that 3 weeks before going to my office, he had data inside his pacemaker saying that he would maybe have a stroke. So it was too late for him. But that means there's probably a lot of value to treat this data in a real, a more efficient way. And now pacemakers and defibrillators are medical devices that are indeed connected. They had sensors already, but now they are connected. That means that transmitters are able to push data back to physician. And as you can see, patient can sleep in plain day with open windows. That's the manufacturer side. I would say patient side maybe. And it's more like that for us physicians, which means you're getting a lot of notifications from manufacturers saying you need to check things, basically, and there's a lot of problem. And 80 or 90% of this is just noise. So that's an issue. And as a matter of fact, you have all these notifications, but most of the time you could miss what's really important there, and you need some space to optimize this. And the consequence is that most of the time the adoption is very low, so that's why we're missing things. This is not just a problem for pacemakers. This is a general problem for most chronic diseases in healthcare space, because basically sensors are going to be smarter, to be in higher numbers, and that's a huge number of patients. So obviously, physicians are not going to be able to treat this data by hand, or I don't think so. So basically, my point here is to say, okay, machine learning is great, and machine learning and deep learning in medicine is great when it comes to doing diagnosis, prediction, and especially in the imaging space, so radiology, so histology, pathology, or for ophthalmology as well. This is very common. We know that, but good old-fashioned artificial intelligence has a lot of space when it comes to clinical decision support systems. And my point will be mostly about techniques I've learned back there that we still use, which are knowledge engineering techniques that provides a lot of value when it comes to reasoning and automate human processes with AI algorithms. So that would be more logic-based and deterministic algorithms. So, when I said back there, 20, 30 years, for me it was only 10 years, of course, we've seen a lot of things around expert systems. And the idea, as you know, was to say, okay, if we were able to put the knowledge in a separate base, probably that would help a lot to separate the inference engine and the knowledge base. So that was one idea. And something that is interesting is in medicine, we have a very, very strong history of knowledge-based systems. and a lot of structured data, even if we don't have only structured data, but that means a lot. So I'm going to basically review the kind of knowledge models we have in medicine or we use a lot, and to focus on applied ontology so that everyone in this room know what it is. Just to check now, how many people have learned or know something about ontologies in the room? Can you raise your hand? So we have 2. Okay, I'm happy to be here. I think it's the main thing that people should know, even doing a lot of machine learning. So basically, this is very basic. I mean, the business rule systems, it's basically you're going to express things and say, okay, there's rain, I need my umbrella, etc. I'm not going to take a lot of time about this. This is very old techniques, of course, but it had some success in the 70s, 80s, and we still use it a lot now for very specific problems, but has a lot of problem when it comes to scalability, maintenance of a huge rule-based system, etc. So it's being used a lot, you know it. I won't go deeper on this one. Clinical practice guidelines is the fact that physicians express a lot by consensus guidelines, so they gather and they express together what's the state of the art of the evidence in medicine, and they try to have very formalized guidelines for physicians to use. But you can also, so usually take this form. So usually you have, decision trees that sometimes can be very informal. So you see here, basically patient choice is everywhere. So it's not anymore a deterministic decision tree, but sometimes it's better, but that takes a lot of space. It's some kind of knowledge model, but it's to be used by humans. You can digitalize this and use it, of course, in a system. It can seem very basic, but that's still very important in the medicine decision support system space. And then there's ontologies. Okay, so what's about ontology? So ontology is actually a philosophical term. So that means the study of being. That comes back to Aristotle. But when I'm speaking of applied ontologies, I mean by that ontologies in computer science. And the definition from Gruber is kind of, well, it can seem weird at first. So explicit specification of a conceptualization. What does this mean? That means that basically, as a human, we share common concepts or mental representations of things. What is a chair? What is a person? So we share that. That's mental ideas. But we are able at some point to have formal specifications to describe this. And that's exactly what's an ontology. So this is very used and very important in medicine for a few reasons. Because of course there's a lot of data, but I'm going to go back to that. So one of them is that, this is the number of papers in biomedicine indexed in PubMed, which is the main database for literature and evidence papers in medicine. And as you can see, the trend is very high. So basically we have now, I think, something like 4,000 new papers, scientific approved papers, but reviewing committees with new information and evidence in medicine per day. So that's a problem. And that's many years now since a lot of companies have thought, okay, we need to digest that automatically because a lot of this is going to bring new information and maybe to patent new genes or new molecules. So we need to be able to digest that on a daily basis. So you can't do any more human techniques to do that. So even for very specialized people. Second one is, of course, linked to DNA and all what we call omics, so genomics, proteomics, transcriptomics, so everything that comes from the living on a DNA plus basis, with all the ability we have now to, genotype every people, every animal, etc., generates a lot of data, but you need to be able to have models to express which genes you know, etc. And this is something that needs to be based on a knowledge system as well. We also have very big terminologies that are here to solve what I mentioned before as the Babel problem. So basically you have a lot of databases everywhere for research, for routine care, but you need to understand if this is the same thing you're speaking about. You have a lot of different terms for the same concept. So, for myocardial infarction, for instance, you will have hundreds of different ways to say it in different databases. So you will need a common way to describe it. That's not just a terminology. It may seem that you just need a terminology. It's not. You need things way stronger. So we have a lot of things. You have a lot of terminologies, but basically, in the end, what an ontology would be that a terminology would not be is something with relations between the nodes or the concepts that are not just parent-son relations, not just is a relationship, but a lot of other relationships. So I'm going to spend a few minutes of what is an ontology technically. This is something that is kind of a chimera that comes from both object-based systems, a specific language, this is OL. I'm going to spend a few minutes on that also, and semantic networks. So basically, semantic networks are just nodes and relations. With most of the relations would be is a, so a bird. Sorry for the French here. An antibiotic is a drug. Penicillin is an antibiotic. So it's very basic. So it's a taxonomy basically, and this is the first relation you will see everywhere. But you have other kinds of relations you may want to see. So for instance, partology, which means you may say that something is part of something else. And you have a lot, you can define all kinds, hundreds of relations between things. And an ontology will grant the ability to model not only is a relationship, but a lot of other relationships. So you can have a lot of different axes around that. Second, ontologies rely on first-order logic. So the main asset of ontologies is probably the fact that it's decidable. So you can actually be certain that you're going to be able to infer things. It's not going to loop forever when you're trying to compute. So, and it's based on the fact you use predicates in this form that will always be the same syntax, but that's what you need to allow decidability. And it's based on description logics. So that's something we heard more probably since Google began to speak about knowledge graphs. So I mean, knowledge graph for me is a term I didn't even knew, before a few days, because for me it's just knowledge models. But Google in 2002, I think, or maybe 2007, I think, began to speak about knowledge graph in the way they maintain their knowledge base. And that's very close to what I'm speaking right now. And description logic is part of that. Description logic means you're going to separate the assertion box where you will store the facts about instances, so about a given individual, a given city, a given chair, with the terminology box, which is where you're going to retain the knowledge. So the general knowledge about things, the fact that the gender could be male or female, the fact that a human has a gender, and all these things are universals, universal knowledge. And you're going to separate these two kinds of descriptions. And here is the semantic web stack a lot of you, I think, may know. That was described, I think, Tim Berners-Lee originally. And we sit here. So all of these are, W3C consortium standards. XML, of course, RDF, the resource description framework, is used for describing everything around the web, but also to describe real entities and not just things on the web. And ontology sits here. But so the strongest thing I want to express here is the fact that ontologies really rely on the subject, predicate, object relation. So everything will be expressed in a form of a triplet, basically. And you will always have two nodes and a relation between the two nodes or an information between the two. The fact that Paris, sorry for the French again, Paris is located in France, for instance. So everything can be decomposed in this small form. And when you're going on the web, I mean the documentary web as we know it, is basically the web of strings and, in certain sense of characters. You also know that Wikidata based on Wikipedia, is a way to express more formal things. And this rely on the same kind of triplets we mentioned before, and basically have a lot of algorithms that try to transform this to triplet form so that it's machine readable, basically, and it's a structure things. This applies to models we use in the domain of, so patient, so it's very simple, but it's very powerful in the end. I'm going to accelerate a little, sorry. And in the web space, you have a lot of different databases that rely on this kind of languages, RDF mostly. And this is all in connection because all this data can be mapped across different databases. And what I want to show you here is you of course checked the black area, the dark area. This is only life science. That means the density of knowledge and relation between databases in life science is way higher than in any domain in the open link data. I mean, if there's just one slide, is this one. So that may suggest something, that there may be a reason why it's like that. And I think you will discover in academic labs in medicine that they use a lot engineering techniques about knowledge bases and modeling knowledge. And I think it's something we can use in a lot of other domains. So that's just a very, very quick request here, saying, okay, give me on a map, based on here is coordinates, give me every subclass of something that is called a hospital. And I mean, this request is very short, and it can spread across all the databases here, everything here, to show you that in 10 seconds. So that's how powerful it is. So you have a dedicated request language you can use that uses semantics, indeed. All2, which is a web ontology language, is also a standard, and it adds a lot of things and a lot of power to ontologies, which is a very basic triplet form. It adds a lot of restrictions of different things you can do, and it's very powerful. Just to be very fast, this would be just a taxonomy with classes and relations you will have in ontologies. You will be able to express a lot of axioms that are always triplets. So subclass, for instance, by disjunction or other properties. The fact that female gender is similar to a person gender that has value the F data value, for instance, these kind of things. And you can distribute your knowledge across your network. That's something very interesting. So that means when you have a definition here of someone with anticoagulation, we have a definition originally saying, okay, it's a person that takes medication, some antivitamin Ks, which is an anticoagulant, and also a few things. Okay, and it stopped here. We didn't have the last part. And then a new new company launched new anticoagulants. And in a normal system, we would have to maintain this information everywhere. But in an ontology, you will have this knowledge only in one space. So you're going to just change one line, one definition, one formal definition for your concept, and it's going to be used by all the other knowledge or information you have in your graph. So basically, you will have the ability to check the consistency, the logic consistency of all your knowledge base, and to be certain that the way you express things is consistent across your graph, which is extremely powerful in terms of maintenance of your knowledge base. But that also means that if you are able to express definitions, you can have a data lake of your knowledge base, so a kind of knowledge lake, where you will define every concept, every node, and you will just say, okay, classify me this knowledge. Because since you have formal definitions of your concept, it's going to gather the taxonomy each time and say to you, it's not consistent. This cannot exist, or this cannot exist with this other concept, or there's a problem here. But it will, recreate the hierarchy in every axis you will represent. So it's very powerful. Very shortly, 3 basic problems. You cannot do addition in ontologies. So that might not be a very big problem, but just know it. And okay, something that's very specific to ontology is the fact we are in an open world assumption domain. What does this mean? It means that that's not because I don't have friends of Facebook, but I don't have real friends, basically. So usually in the computer space, when you don't know something and you're going to query, it will say no. If you say, okay, is Arnaud living in Paris and I'm not in the database, the answer you will be 0. You know, like fail. But it will not say, I don't know. In the ontology space, it will never compute something that it's not certain to be true, basically. So it's an open world assumption, meaning anything can be true if I don't know it for sure. It's based on the fact that it's things described on the web. So it has something to do with the editorial pattern. But it can be a problem sometimes. And also, you don't have unique name assumption. That means if you have two things with different names, it doesn't assume it's something different. So if you have two variables or two nodes, it could be exactly the same entity. And if you have a Donald Trump concept and a president of the USA concept, it will not make the assumption that these two things are different. And actually, they are not different, or at least for some parts of time. So this is powerful, but it's sometimes very painful, because that means if you have a medication A and medication B, or any two things, you have to express explicitly these two things are different. And so you need closure. So you need to say, okay, I have a patient, but this patient has 0 device, because if you don't say it, it could have a device, for instance. So every relation you create could bring some necessity to close. Well, it's just things you need to get used to, but at first it's kind of boring. When I began 10 years ago, the reasoning time for a very small ontology in terms of reasoning was 25 minutes. It was kind of painful to debug, but now it's usable. And we applied that at Implicity to do automatic reasoning across patients. When we have all the information we need as an input, we are able to apply medical reasoning automatically to these patients in a deterministic way. And we are able to filter out a lot of things that were noise, as I said before. That means the physician or the nurse is able to say, I don't care about this one, because I have very specific reasons in my protocol that we can mimic in an ontology, because it's just a knowledge base. So you can take a knowledge from a human, put it in an ontology. You don't need training anything, and you can apply this to real data. So that's powerful. And the thing that's quite amazing about that is it's actually probably, or at least some of it, is outside FDA clearance when it comes to medical device, because when machine learning or deep learning will always be at some point a black box, or some of it will be a black box. It has to be through regulation as a medical device. Some of it could be auditable by humans, so you can use it differently. But again, the more powerful will be the associations of the two. So the fact that you maintain your knowledge in this kind of systems, and you add it as an input or as a label for your machine learning techniques. Thanks a lot. I will be more than happy to answer any question.
Okay, want to start and challenge Arnaud about this presentation? Perhaps can you start with explaining us how the team is composed today?
Sure.
Data scientists, and how does it work?
So we're a team of 24. We have a product and tech team that developing a platform to integrate the data and to provide a service on a platform, a SaaS platform for physicians. And we have a separate R&D team that's just developing new algorithms that could be either knowledge engineering-based algorithms, but now we also do machine learning as well on data, trying to predict things. And we have a chance to be the only startup company in France that was retained through a tender from state to have access to all the data from French patients nationwide and all clinical data to match up with our data from devices, which is a great opportunity for us.
Hello, Nicholas. Thank you for the presentation. Quick question is, actually I have a lot, but one would be like, how do you know if you don't discard something that is relevant, which would be a problem with classical AI, but you probably have the same kind of problem. And as a secondary question, how does it fare against deep learning or whatever, like spam filters or other traditional techniques? You're 84%. How does it fare?
Okay. Okay. First question. I think, it's maybe doesn't differ so much in terms of, okay, are you going to have a classification that is wrong? So in any case, you need, of course, to test it, and you need to have a way to make sense of it. But still, the big difference compared to machine learning, when you don't always know what's going to happen, and sometimes you could have global performance, but some patients are going to cross both ways, and maybe the one that was correctly classified is no longer classified, and you just have your overall performance. Is that we have a much more deterministic pathways. So basically, you usually are able to have the exhaustive list of logic deduction that went all through the classification. So you have auditability of the reasoning part, so that's still great, even if it takes a lot of time to have it. Your second question is, so how does it compare? Or yeah, well, basically I think it's solutions to different problems. But the way I see it, when I started doing this PhD about knowledge engineering, it was before deep learning, obviously, or the very beginning of it. We already had neural networks since many years and decades. What I see now is a lot of companies that are doing machine learning, or very large corporation companies doing machine learning or deep learning, in fact, use this kind of technology. It's just hidden, or I mean, it may not be so hidden, but they don't spend so much time speaking about that. So my point is to say, this is not just an exotic technique that just occurred last year. This is something that exists since decades. But when I meet with data scientists, as we call them now, 1% of them know about these techniques, when it's in fact what the major company use now to maintain their symbolic, all the symbolic stuff, basically. So we know they use it for recommendation over the web, for YouTube, for other things, for Netflix. They use it a lot now because of the symbolic problems they have. And so it's going to combine with machine learning, basically. So it's just an extra thing you can use, I guess. But it's definitely not something that could solve the deep learning problems.
Thanks for your talk. I was just wondering, can you take into account probabilities of facts and the variation of probabilities given the knowledge that you acquire during whatever process is your process?
So that's actually a very good question, because ontologies are kind of always true, always false model. So it has always been a very important matter to understand to what extent you can use these systems that are basically, expressing very strong binary facts, let's say, and know if you can use them by doing fuzzy logic or probabilities or Bayesian expression of reality. There has been a lot of works on that you maybe know already the last decade. I would say it's not the perfect way to do it, but you can combine a large data set with this kind of systems, and you can do Bayesian networks, for instance, on top of your knowledge base. So you can combine it. It's not by essence the best way to do it, but I think now you have ways to deliver this kind of thing. And probability and Bayesian networks have always been at the core of medical evidence, so it's still there.
We can move on, I think. Thank you, Arnaud.
Thanks a lot.